Hey there, this episode of the podcast is a bit different. I'm going to give you a trip report about a recent road trip that we took to Memphis, Tennessee to see the Inside the Walt Disney Archives exhibit, which is currently on display at the Graceland Exhibition Center. Lots of cool stuff from Disney's movies, the parks. It's really worth checking out if you're able to make the trip. I'm going to tell you all about it and talk about what our experience was like in Memphis and some tips that might help you if you decide to make the trip. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society Podcast. Thanks for joining me here on episode 147 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. Like I mentioned in the intro, if you are fairly new to this podcast, maybe you heard the Len Testa episode. Thanks to all of you for feedback on that. That was so much fun to record, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you're new, this is primarily a show where I have guests, we do interviews, I talk to Imagineers, cool experts like Len, but every once in a while I will do trip reports. Now, they were more common before COVID when we were going to Walt Disney World, other places, maybe once a year or so. Hasn't really happened since that point. About a month or so ago, we were thinking we haven't done any travel at all during the pandemic. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, so we thought, well, something that might be cool is just to do a short road trip, about 4 hours. We planned this well before the Delta variant increased so much. So I was a little nervous about continuing and actually doing it, but I'll talk a bit about how we kind of avoided most of what could have been a challenge there, going with my wife and my two daughters. One is 12, one is 8. So we were concerned, obviously, that especially for my 8-year-old daughter, that she doesn't have access to the vaccine, unlike my older daughter who got vaccinated this summer. So we had to be extra careful. But we thought, given that we were going to mostly be outside, this exhibit is indoors, but we wear masks, the whole deal, that we would take a shot at it. And I'm glad we did, because I feel like it was good to, one, just get out in the world a little bit, and two, to see something connected to the parks. Because, I've been doing this podcast, and the last time I was at a Disney theme park, or any theme park for that matter, was September 2019. Because we had planned to do a big trip to Disneyland in May 2020, so we didn't do anything in the interim. And of course, that didn't happen. And now, in no hurry to get on an airplane, so it might be a little while before we do so. So this was something we could do that, had some really cool pieces from the films and especially from the parks that, seemed to be within the realm of possibility and did not involve an airplane flight or anything like that. So I'm going to talk all about it. Like I mentioned, it was super fun, and just, probably the time at the actual exhibit was only about an hour or so, but we still were able to have a good weekend, and I suspect some of you may be considering it. This exhibit's there till January 2nd, 2022, and, we're only in August. So I think this might be something where, especially if you live kind of in the Midwest or the South, where you could make a road trip out of it and feel a little safer about doing it versus getting on a plane and flying to a theme park where there's going to be thousands and thousands of people. So I'll walk you through the exhibit. I'm not going to spoil everything. There's way too many things, and again, it's like kind of a typical type of traveling exhibition that you would see. So there's only so much to spoil, but I'm not going to describe every piece you would see. There's a lot of cool little gems, but I'll kind of take you through each room and some of the highlights for me and just kind of the overall experience of what it's like in terms of just tickets and parking and the whole deal to make it easier for you if you decide to go. So let's do it. Let's go inside the Disney Archives in Memphis. So let's just start with the exciting logistics of it. Well, first of all, if you've heard nothing about this exhibit, let me give you the real basics. I'll post a link where you can read about the various highlights and such on the show notes for this page. But basically, it's a 10,000 square foot traveling exhibit. It's at the Graceland Exhibition Center in Memphis, which is basically a building. It's not in Graceland itself, but it's in the same complex where you don't have to buy a ticket to Graceland, but you park in the same parking lot. Parking is $10, and that's the same lot. It's a huge outdoor lot. And then back in the corner, kind of tucked away, is the exhibition center. And again, this is not a brand new exhibition. It actually premiered at the D23 Expo Japan in 2018. But it's basically a selection of items that the Walt Disney Archives has, they say, put out on loan. It says 450 objects, which, is well spread out across a bunch of rooms. So it never feels like it's all cramped together. Pretty easy to see everything. And in terms of the ticket prices, so you go there, and I felt like it was pretty reasonable. If you think about a lot of kind of, at least here in St. Louis, your museums, science centers, whatnot, where they have special exhibits, they'll often run $20, $30 easy. So the fact that this exhibit is for adults 11 and up, $15, 5 to 10, ages 5 to 10, it's $8, and 4 and under is free. It seems like about right. I don't feel like it was insane, really, given, if you're interested in it. Plus, if you're a D23 Gold member, you're actually going to save 20% on that. So for us as a family of 4, we had, my daughter's 12 became an adult. Hey, I love it. 10 and under is always kids to these kinds of things. But it was like, before tax, I think it was $53. With tax, like $58, and then we paid for parking. So, the whole price of what we did was $68, and we were paying, to be clear, for self-guided tours. You can get a VIP ticket, we did see a small group doing a guided tour. If you would like a guided tour, those are $50 a person. Basically, anyone 3 and up would pay for that. So just if you're taking a family of 4 and want to do VIP, and you're all over 3 or over, that's $200. You do get some other things like little trinkets, and then there's a lounge at this bar, which was empty, and we were there because it was early in the day. Also a voucher for food if you're going to go to a Graceland restaurant. I will say the little food place at the exhibition center was not open when we were there. And same discount on that. So that's kind of the pricing. And, if you're a Disney fan that's an expert, I really don't think you need the tour guide. And I guess if you really want to get the full experience, but from what I heard, it seemed like some of the, I didn't follow them around. I only heard a second, was kind of the basic info. And there's a lot. There's videos. There's also a lot of little signs that have various people from the Walt Disney Archives to be like, hi, I'm this person, let me tell you about this. So they do a good job of explaining the various pieces and what they are. Even if you don't consider yourself an expert on the parks or the movies, you can generally get a pretty good idea of what it is. So unless you want to get every ounce of your experience, I don't think it's a great value to get the VIP tickets. Also, too, I would not go in there expecting to get good merchandise. Because I wondered, if they would have, sometimes these exhibits have pretty cool gift shops or such. And they might have some books that were really interesting or something related to the archives that would be interesting. Not the case here. Basically, what it was is in the exhibition center, but not in the exhibit itself, there was essentially, it felt like the most generic thing that Disney could give you. Like someone basically called up Disney and said, hey, we're doing an exhibit. Can you send us the most boring collection of t-shirts that you have? It's mostly Mickey t-shirts. They did have some Stitch ones because of the Elvis connection. But really, unless you really want to buy something, I wouldn't allot any money or time for merchandise. There's just really nothing there that you can't get online or probably at your local Target, basically, for the same deal. And so the exhibition center itself is a blue and white building kind of snuck in the back. And I mention that because if you just use your GPS, like we use Google Maps, and it actually guided us to the employee staff parking lot, not to the right place. So we pulled in and the security guard seemed very confused, but then directed us back. So basically, you can just put in Graceland and it'll take you to the correct parking lot from there. And then you just kind of mosey onto the back and you park near it. Again, we had tickets. It opened July 23rd. So we were going about 2 weeks after it opened. First Saturday in August. And basically, when we pulled up, there were maybe 5 cars there, like near the building. And for a while, we didn't see anyone else in the exhibit. Our time was 10:30. They're timed tickets. I don't get the impression they're going to be that strict, at least if the crowds are like they were when we were there, because it was dead. And I don't mean that in a bad way, though. Like I mentioned COVID. Obviously, I was really nervous about going in an indoor exhibit like that, which might not be huge, and most, even with masks on, being all tight with a bunch of people. This to me seemed like a very bad idea. And as the cases went up, I got very nervous. So I was relieved that it was basically empty. And also, it made for a very comfortable experience. I never had a situation where I was trying to read something or trying to look at something like you often get at museums, and somebody was like right behind me or somebody was in front of me and wouldn't move. There was nothing like that. We did eventually see some people who I guess probably had gotten there right when it opened as we moseyed in. And like I mentioned, there was one tour group, but it was very pleasant and very empty. And barring, they are doing a few special events, like they have a few Disney trivia nights that they're doing. The next one is August 26th. They're doing like a dive-in movie at the hotel nearby, which is the guest house at Graceland. Tea party and a tour, all types of various things. Nothing that sounds so amazing. I do think there's something that's kind of cool coming up, is there's going to be a panel about the Haunted Mansion in late October that they're doing there, which I thought might be kind of interesting. They haven't announced who the guest speakers are, but regardless, they're doing special events there. I am sure your thought is Walt Disney Archives exhibit. This is going to be packed. This is going to be something really nuts. It was very sleepy. And I know we were there kind of late summer, but I suspect it's not going to be that every day is not going to be just packed. Maybe Labor Day weekend will be different. But overall, I think it's going to be pretty easy to mosey around when you're there. They also have the jungle bars, what they call it in there, which is basically a bunch of tables out in this giant cavernous area, which looks like it's a bar where they do special events, and they also sell food. Nothing was open when we were there, so I just want to give you a heads up. If you're planning to eat there, just know that it may not work out, which of course makes a difference if you think, oh, we'll just get that $15 voucher and then we'll use it. There may not be anything to use it on. Now, maybe it was going to open later in the day because, like I said, we were there in the morning. But that's just something to think about where I wouldn't plan to eat there, given if it's not crowded, they may not even have anyone working there at the time. Last thing to mention before I get into the exhibit is accommodations. So the closest place to stay, we did not stay there, is the guest house at Graceland, which appears to be very nice. It's not in Graceland again, but it's basically across the street and down like a block. So if you are doing a quick kind of one night stay where all you're going there to do is just see this, or maybe go to Graceland, which Graceland, very pricey. We did not go there. This might be a good place to stay. They do have hotel packages where it says you can save a bit off your tickets. You may save a little bit on the hotel. I'm not sure. We didn't really research that too much, but that is something to look into. If you are going to stay there, I would look into the packages, price it out, see if it's worthwhile. It appears to be a fairly recent hotel that has been added. We stayed downtown in a hotel because we were going to do other things in Memphis. That's about 15 minutes away from Graceland. So it was an easy drive. We hopped on the highway. You get off the highway, go a little ways. It's very simple to get there. So if you decide you want to see like things on the riverfront or downtown, Civil Rights Museum, lots of other Beale Street, Stax Records, a lot of other things in Memphis, it might be worth staying there versus out near Graceland where there's not things you can really walk to like there is in the downtown area. So I will talk more about Memphis in a bit, but I want to get to the actual inside of the exhibit itself. It's very simple. You go in, you pay your ticket, you walk in. The first room is basically an introduction to the Walt Disney Archives itself. There's a lot of big pictures up on the walls. You see the famous one of Walt, which is on the front of the Bob Thomas book too. Nice message from Dave Smith, who of course was the guy who created the Disney Archives when it was founded in 1970, giving you the basics of what the archives are when they were created, good background right off the bat. Also, just some history that is nice to see. As you start to enter, you're seeing a lot of info. There's the giant drawing that Herb Ryman did of Disneyland framed on the wall. Very cool. I can't get enough of things like that, seeing that original drawing So a lot of things about a room about kind of early Disneyland. We had some shots, like a drawing, a color drawing of the Jungle Cruise, and just some really basic info relating to that pitch concepts for Disneyland that I can't get enough of that. I could just look at things like that all day. The idea kind of how did Disney actually ultimately pitch his park and some examples of that. The next area is an area called the Reading Room, which essentially is recreating that idea in the Disney Archives where people are doing research, studying the historic materials, maybe visitors, people coming in from outside. So they have an approach to that. And of course, I have a nice picture of a cardboard cutout. You got to love the cardboard cutouts of Walt Disney, like they have in One Man's Dream, which I've taken a picture of before, like him doing the Epcot thing. Some of it is like, okay, looks like a desk. But what's really cool in this room is you have some art from Fantasia and some really original art that is put up on the wall, essentially like if somebody was reviewing all of this art from Fantasia. Lots of neat stuff there. Like there's a desk with a half-completed drawing of the hippo, and that's also, I really like that. All that original artwork from Fantasia is worth seeing, including a poster of Fantasia, which was actually a set decoration from Saving Mr. Banks. There's also a wall of fake books, which I was trying to see if a lot of books that I had, it looks like, wow, they really brought in a lot of books for this. Nope, it's fake. But they're all real books, in meaning they were real historical Disney books. You see some famous ones like Bob Thomas's book, like I mentioned. A lot of the art of Disney, earlier books, not as much more recent things. But as we kind of mosey through, you're seeing more pieces from Disney history, some creepy Mickeys, I will say, as we go through. There's Mickey wearing overalls, Engineer Mickey Mouse, which was Walt Disney actually used on opening day at Disneyland. So that's pretty cool. You have an animatronic head of Mr. Lincoln, which I love those. I mean, it's creepy. You can see like teeth and it's kind of opened up. Very creepy. It's actually from the 1964 New York World's Fair, the State of Illinois Pavilion. So not the one from Disneyland. It's actually from earlier. We have a Congo Queen model, which actually was used on a Disneyland TV show, Trip Through Adventureland. So that's pretty cool that Disney brought that. So a lot of little models and just really cool stuff. There's a group of maquettes, including some that are more recent, like Elsa from Frozen, and character merchandise. Good variety of art and just of elements of the parks. And I mentioned it earlier, but I've mostly been focusing on the parks, and that is obviously due to some of my interest, but there's a lot of cool things too, like I mentioned with Fantasia from the movies. There's a room that's an art collection, which basically describes how Walt Disney Archives basically takes a lot of sketches and various cells and drawings from films and the past and puts them together, and that's important. You also even have something like artwork from the long-playing Haunted Mansion record, which a lot of us talk about, which is very well known to fans. But the room, so I've kind of been talking about those intro rooms, which all were really cool, and I like them. But the room that really took it to the next level for me is when you got into the animatronics and some of the more larger scale parts of the parks, including the first big one, which I was excited to see given that I've talked recently with Chris Runco, is an audio animatronics figure of the Rex 24 Captain Rex robot from the original Star Tours at Disneyland. That's very cool. I took a picture with that one, smiling hugely, though you can't see it from beyond the mask. And another one that I thought was really neat, especially that I didn't expect it, was a Mayan priest attraction figure from El Rio del Tiempo in the Mexican Pavilion. A large figure, I mean, life size. I couldn't remember exactly where it would have been in the ride, but very intricate. This is one of those that you're going to want to study and really see when you're there. Also, the alien from the great movie ride, Alien Xenomorph. Again, huge, a little creepy, but huge to see, taken out of its element when it's not looming over your ride vehicle. But again, those are the kinds of things that I really came there for. As a parks fan, I think you're going to be interested. In that same room, you also have a pirate audio animatronics figure from Disneyland next to a big Pirates poster, but he's got the mug, the beer mug, very convincing, kind of standing behind this brick, put in kind of a really neat setup. And really the biggest element from the parks that you're going to see, if people go, they're going to take pictures of, is the 3 Hitchhiking Ghosts figures. These are attraction figures from Walt Disney World, the Magic Kingdom Park. And I did put a picture of this in the main blog for this podcast because you've got the 3 figures, you've got 3 gravestones, the ones that actually are that relate to some of the most important figures of the Haunted Mansion, like Yale Gracie and Mark Davis. And then you also have 4 of the images that were created for the stretching room, all in this huge setting there. Very, very cool. One of my favorite things that I saw, we actually were getting ready to leave, and I thought, I want to go right back and look again at this. And I also, Accommodations was the other gravestone that they have in there. And just to go back and be able to see that, because it's one of the cooler things that I've seen in any type of Disney exhibit. And one of the highlights for me, for sure. Some elements of the movies were also nearby in the big room, including the Rocketeer jetpack that was actually used by Billy Campbell in the film. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the electromagnetic shrinking machine. So that was really cool to see. A TRON light cycle. Promotional, though, from TRON Legacy, a big Herbie. Was not from the original Love Bug from one of the later movies, but still really neat to see. And the last kind of big attraction thing is a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride vehicle. Oh my gosh, you just gotta love that. So a lot to see there. The attraction vehicle was from Disneyland's version, and the Herbie was from Herbie Fully Loaded. So lots to see there. And just very impressive. And I think that's kind of the showpiece room that has, there's the vehicles, then you nearby you have the room with all of the audio animatronics and figures. So much to see. This is really where you're going to probably spend the most time just kind of in all of it. I should be clear, you cannot sit on the light cycle or Mr. Toad's vehicle. There's no real interaction in that way. Sometimes when you see the exhibits, they'll have a room where kids can kind of climb on things. This is all just pieces to look at. But I will say that my daughters at least found it really interesting and did not get restless. Now, if your kid's a little younger, maybe it's a bit different, but at least that way it seemed like it's something that would be enough to see, especially if your kids are into the parks and you've been taken to the parks as fans. Last big room that we had here is the room with some items from Fox Films, notably a Wolverine claws and suit being worn there, but some various things that Disney, they called it like more recently acquired items, which would relate to 20th Century Fox and some various things there. You also go by, they have kind of what a researcher would use when they're looking at historical photos like film or, various different formats. Big machine. Does not look easy to use. So that was neat to see. And as we finish, there is a recreation of the Legends Plaza. This to me was it was all right, I guess. The Team Disney building, which opened in 1990, has kind of a giant area where various Disney legends are recognized, and the pillars in front of the building. So that was recreated, some with handprints, some with not. It was kind of fun to look around and see who was included there. You even had people like Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins, Imagineers, a lot of various Disney legends. So kind of cool to see. And just to be able to, it finishes on a note to say that the Walt Disney Archives, is honoring Disney legends, and this is one way we're doing so. Few other quick items I wanted to mention before we finish that I enjoyed. They had some really cool attraction posters. I really enjoyed Bjorn Aronsson's poster of Peter Pan's flight from the original one from 1955 at Disneyland. There's also the green Haunted Mansion poster that I know most of us are very familiar with. That was really cool to see. That was done by Ken Chapman and Mark Davis. It's also on the cover of the recent book about the Haunted Mansion, not the one about the movies, the more recent one that Disney put out. Also, Pirates of the Caribbean poster in a similar way. Also, just some nice images of Walt Disney. It ends where you have Disney, a picture of Disney in front of Disneyland with a quote about how we keep moving forward, opening new doors. Just kind of ends it on an inspiring note. And I just want to talk in general for a moment. I've described some of the highlights and big pieces. There's a lot of other smaller pieces. You could spend a lot of time reading all of the various little cards about each one. This was as high level as I could get, but I hope this gives you an idea of the types of things that you might see in here. And not every Disney fan is going to find this so interesting, but if you're the type of person that every time you go to Hollywood Studios, you want to go spend a while at One Man's Dream, or you visited the Walt Disney Family Museum or the Walt Disney Hometown Museum in Marceline and just thought, I could go back there every day, I'm one of those people. Or if you read a lot of books about Disney history, this is totally for you. Now, of course, there is the challenge of getting there in Memphis and getting there during a pandemic. But if you're able to make the trip, and there's a lot of kind of fun little smaller items and little gems in there that I think you're really going to enjoy. So for me, I felt like, despite having to drive there and going through everything, it was totally worth it. It really, also not having been to the parks, getting a chance to kind of go see something, like I mentioned it earlier, related to the parks was really important for me. I came home thinking like, okay, I can't wait till I can get back, and this is why, if that makes sense. Sometimes get a little cynical, especially when news comes out about price increases and everything else, like we talked about in the last podcast. But I have to remember there's a reason that we keep going back to the parks and love them so much. I want to take a brief moment before I talk more about Memphis in general, and that is to talk about COVID a little bit, because I hesitated a little bit even to be too positive about everything, because I get a little nervous about promoting travel at this point. And I know a lot of people are going on vacations, and I'm not here to make any judgments on anyone for going to Walt Disney World or Disneyland or anything. I just hope that you're safe when you're out there. But as we approached our trip, I started to I wasn't sleeping very well. I was so nervous because you always have this thought like, okay, we're doing this for fun, but what could be the impact on my daughter or on any of us if we caught COVID? And, and when you go to a city that you're not familiar with, that, a lot of people don't have those same considerations. So like I said, we stayed at a downtown hotel where we were wearing masks anytime when we were indoors that we were not in our room. And it was fairly rare, not 0%. But I'd say maybe 20, 30% at most people, not employees, I'm talking guests, were wearing them. And that was pretty low, and it was a little surprising for me. So even while we were there, I was more hesitant. We had planned to do a few more indoor things that as we went along, kind of decided it wasn't worth it. So even as far as eating, Memphis is not a great town, at least downtown, for outdoor seating with food. There are some places that have amazing outdoor seatings, but they're mostly breweries like Wiseacre Brewery and Ghost River Brewery. But the best we found was a place called Aldo's Pizza, which it's downtown, very solid pizza place, but had a big outdoor area. And it was also on a street that was blocked off that had a streetcar that went by and had a very nice atmosphere. So we ate there because, I only mention this just to say that if you would go and stay, a place like that could be really valuable, especially if you have kids that are picky eaters. But in general, I just say that outdoor dining wasn't as easy as I expected. I wanted to acknowledge, even while being really gung-ho about the archives exhibit, that as we enter the fall, I don't know, I hesitate with everything, with how to do things, because while I'm vaccinated and 3/4 of our family is, it's still going to be a while and we don't know what the future is going to hold. So I'm presenting this because I know that, like any of us, we're in this for the long haul with this pandemic. So we are going to have to find ways to enjoy ourselves and travel when it seems feasible. And this seems more feasible than possibly going to a place with so many people. I just want to recognize that because I don't want it to be misconstrued or thought of that I'm not taking that into account, because we definitely did on our trip. Like on the drive down, it's about a little over 4 hour drive from St. Louis. We stopped at a local Panera, fully outdoor seating, took care of that. Similar on the way back to drive through. When we didn't eat indoors anywhere. Another of our meals, we ate at a place called Central Barbecue, which is one of Memphis's main barbecue areas. They have outdoor seating, but again, it was a little too nuts. So we just took our food to a nearby park by the riverfront that was very empty. There's things you can do to basically be outside, but it's not going to be as convenient if you want to be as safe as you can be. But I will say right there, that was a really great experience. And it was super hot in Memphis. Now, I know if you're in Florida, you're probably like, yeah, sure, so what? But it was about 90 degrees or so, heat index around 97-ish both days, very sunny. We didn't have any rain, so that's especially Saturday and Sunday, very warm days. So again, when you're trying to mostly eat outside, it does add a bit of challenges where by, 7, 8 o'clock at night, we were just zonked after being similar to being in like the parks. There's ways to do it. And again, Graceland Exhibition Center, cavernous area, they do not require masks there. There's no current, as of this recording, I'm recording this, just things can change at any minute. But just to give you a heads up, I'm recording this on Friday, August 13th. And as of August 13th, there is not a mask mandate in Memphis. There is one in St. Louis City. So they're not required, but they do encourage it. The workers all had them on. Many people we saw in the exhibition center did. So just something to know as you're going, that Memphis being that way, that we did not see a high level of mask wearing indoors or outside in Memphis. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't go, just something to be aware of. And I'm sure there are many ways that you could enjoy the exhibit and other things in Memphis. And I want to talk about a few things that we really enjoyed that are outdoors that you might enjoy if you happen to go on that trip, or if you just go to Memphis in the future. One of them is the riverfront area. Memphis has a really cool riverfront. St. Louis, it's actually in a lot of ways kind of similar to St. Louis in that there is a bridge that crosses the river from another state. In Memphis, it's from Arkansas to Tennessee. Here it's Illinois to Missouri. And then has a nice riverfront area right next to downtown and with kind of a big icon. Though in Memphis, I don't know, would you call the Bass Pro Shop Pyramid an icon? I'm not sure. But regardless, the riverfront area is very cool. There are a lot of parks, a lot of places you can just go hang out down. It's very simple. It's really close. It's much easier than St. Louis even to get down there. Much nicer. And so you can walk there very easily. One of the coolest things that we really enjoyed was there is a bridge that you can walk across part of the river to Mud Island, which it's not actually muddy, in case you're wondering. But Mud Island is this really cool setup. They actually have a monorail that goes there that I don't think is running right now, possibly due to COVID or just time of year or whatnot. But we did see the monorail, which looked rather old, but I don't know, just kind of sitting there in the station. But it's a significant walk, over a mile, but you get to walk on a pedestrian bridge across part of the Mississippi River, an inlet there. That's really cool. So we did that. And then when you get to Mud Island, there is a recreation, like a model. I wouldn't say recreation is not the right word. A model that you can walk around and through of the Mississippi River, with various landmarks and different cities and different parts of it. And it is really big. Not big, like miles long, but when I say model, you can kind of think it's just going to be this little area you walk across. Very significant, very cool, and just something that's really, I've never seen really anything like it. All outside, you just kind of walk around. They had like a museum in there, but I think that's been closed for good. But basically, all outside, you just walk around this model, shady area, very nice. Also, Mud Island is much more than that, though. They have a bunch of green space. The night we were there was actually going to be a band playing, and there was a food truck, and there was like a DJ spinning music, and all these people coming in with chairs and blankets. And it just seemed like the perfect setup for given the COVID concerns. Like you have an outdoor area where people are sitting all spread apart, lots of space, so much more space than you could have. And there's also kind of a Memphis sign that looks a little bit like the Hollywood sign in California, but on Mud Island, you can go take a picture with it. It's kind of cool. But just in general, having that just amazing view. We were also doing it late enough in the evening where it wasn't as hot. Being able to cross part of the river, visit this island, see something that just a really nice, pleasant experience with downtown in the background. If you go to, there is a place where you can park. You don't have to walk across to Mud Island. There are multiple ways to get there. But if you do go and stay downtown, or just go to Memphis at any point in the future, note this down. Mud Island is one of the cooler spots I've been to in a long time, and especially in the fall. I think it probably will be more crowded than it was when it was hot, but could be a really nice spot given the weather, kind of with a good breeze coming off the water. You get to cross it there. Highly, highly recommended. We spent a long time there on Friday, and my kids were real troopers. They were with how much we walked, especially my younger daughter, and they hung in there. And I think it was just something after sitting in the car for most of the day, just be able to get out. We had dinner, we walked across, saw a bunch of the river, then walked back to our hotel and took it easy for the rest of the night. We enjoyed it a lot. One other place I wanted to mention that we went to Saturday during the day is the Metal Museum. Now, this is something that's not going to interest everyone, but it's such an interesting mix of a sculpture park, a tutorial on how iron and metal is made, and an indoor art exhibit, all thrown into one. How cool is it? I can't say enough good things about it just because it was something totally different. Again, mostly outside. We walked through the courtyard, saw some very cool sculptures. They had a couple areas. One thing that was like a foundry demonstration, which they do several demonstrations at 1 and 1:30, at least on weekends, where we went in and they showed in detailed fashion where like how they make this. And foundries, according to some of the info, used to be very common in the United States, but a lot of it has moved overseas. So they're very rare, but there is one in Memphis. And they also have people that come and study there, do like a 2-year apprenticeship in a house nearby. And I know this is not probably Mud Island, I feel like would be for anyone. This might be a little more if you're interested in art and how things are created. But again, one of those things that also another amazing view. There's like a gazebo looking out over the water. Just a cool place, something very different. They do have tickets, but it's fairly reasonable. The total was $20 for the 4 of us to go in there. And there was a cool exhibit inside. Briefly, we were in there with mirrors, like an art exhibit with a bunch of mirrors that I found really interesting. They have a pretty extensive gift shop. We did not buy anything, but just another element. And just kind of one of those places that you're not going to find. Most cities have zoos, have art museums, botanical gardens, and a lot of them, whatnot. Nothing against any of those in Memphis, but this was something that I feel like is really unique to that city. And again, given COVID, you get to go outside, see something near the river, just go hang out and support a place that's doing something very different and also teaching, which every once in a while when you take on vacation, you want the kids to learn a little bit. Teaching about, something, a very singular craft. And I will say it was very warm, but they required masks for the demonstrations, which were indoors, but at least for the iron, it was like one wall was completely out, so it was open air in that way. So I felt a little better, though there's not a lot of space to stand, so that is something to consider. But you're not required to see those. There's still plenty to see, even if you don't. Just kind of visit another place that's just a little ways from downtown, just couple miles from the main downtown stretch, but very close to everything and easy to get to. You can't walk to it from that stretch in the riverfront, but it's just a short drive, so very easy to get to. So just overall, if you're looking for somewhere to go that is not going to cost you what a Disney trip cost, that might not, if you're like me, not ready to go to Florida given just the rising cases and everything, and aren't really ready for an all-in theme park trip, and we're looking to maybe do a city trip where you can go and kind of be more apart, go to a lot of parks, just see things, I mentioned the zoo. We didn't go, but they have pandas there at the Memphis Zoo. So that is something also that could be worth seeing. This might not be a bad example. You also incorporate a little bit of Disney in with the Walt Disney Archives exhibit, but also see some other things, maybe enjoy some good food. Memphis, of course, is known for Beale Street. We briefly walked through it during the day. I will say that not really a place that you want to go. I mean, nothing totally scandalous. It's not like a red light district or something, but not the perfect place to go with kids. We weren't sure. We thought we'd walk. We thought possibly of eating at one place. It was like an outdoor patio. They weren't even allowing kids on the patio there. They said they only allowed them inside, which was not, we weren't going to do that. So we walked by. I'm glad I got to see it. But I will say, even in the middle of the day, definitely more of a party atmosphere. I think it has more in common with Bourbon Street than I realized in terms of, if you want to go and enjoy a fun bar, it might be a great place to go. But if you're going with a family, no. It was very hot. We walked down the block, back around, came back around. And I'm not trying to be overly prudish or conservative or anything. There was nothing where my girls were, nothing that was really unfortunate that they saw or anything. It's more just the overall vibe of it. It's definitely more of a party atmosphere than I realized when I was thinking more about historic Beale Street with music and everything. And that's really secondary to just kind of the overall setup there. But overall, we had a great time. Glad we got to do it. Unsure things are going with COVID in general. So it feels good to be able to do something where I felt like we were, you're never 100% safe, but as safe as we could be. And most importantly, we got to see a cool look at, I have not been to the Walt Disney Family Museum. So whenever I see that people have gone there, I'm always really jealous. I'm like, man, I have got to get there. And this is something that's actually closer to where we live. And I'm really glad that the Walt Disney Archives brought this to Memphis. Really easy drive down Highway 55 from St. Louis. And if it was closer, I would love to check it out again. If you're able to make the trip, I would highly recommend it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I'll be back soon with more fun interviews and a lot more on the way. And hopefully someday I will be able to do more trip reports. And if you like this format, one of my nuttier episodes was my 30 hours in Walt Disney World trip report, where I saw Galaxy's Edge for the first time and did basically about one day spread across two, but just barely more than 24 hours in a very hot September 2019. You can find that and a lot more. Go to tomorrowsociety.com/podcasts with an S at the end. If you'd like to support the show, there are multiple great ways you can do so. The simplest is just to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts. You know the drill. It makes a big difference, and I really appreciate it. It's awesome to know you're out there enjoying the show, and this is just one way to do so. You can also support the show by becoming a member of the Tomorrow Society through Patreon. You get access to some really cool perks with a small monthly contribution. Shows like this are more common there through the Tomorrow Society Bulletin, which is a monthly show I do just for members of the Tomorrow Society. Learn more, go to patreon.com/Tomorrow Society. I'd love to hear what you think of this. Have you been to the exhibition in Memphis? Are you planning to go? Do you have questions? Shoot me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at TomorrowSOC, Facebook or Instagram at Tomorrow Society, and I'm on YouTube, tomorrowsociety.com/YouTube. Tomorrow Society podcast is hosted, produced, edited, all the other random stuff. Dan Heaton. Music was written by Adam Hookey, performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're all doing well. If you haven't already, go out there, get vaccinated. Let's all be safe and make 2022 the best year possible by the things we do now. Thanks again for checking out this Trip Report podcast, and I will talk to you again next time.